This started on a regular Monday morning. The building's security system had been experiencing intermittent malfunctions, cameras freezing, alarms failing to trigger. My colleague and I were sent to investigate. Upon entering, the reception area appeared normal, the usual fluorescent lights buzzing with their familiar hum. As we moved through the floors, I made a note of the camera feeds on my tablet. They were inconsistent, occasionally freezing for a few seconds before resuming. The technician reassured me it was probably a software glitch or a wiring issue. I told myself it was nothing. The woman at the front desk was polite. She mentioned that the problem had begun about a week ago. "It's mostly cameras in the hallways," she said, "and some alarms don't sound during tests." Her tone was calm, no sign of panic or distress. The building was otherwise fully operational. Mirrors hung in every hallway. Large, standard fixtures above sinks in restrooms and smaller vanity mirrors near conference rooms. I didn't usually pay much attention to them. That afternoon, I noticed that my reflection appeared delayed by a fraction of a second when I made subtle movements. I blinked and looked again. The reflection now seemed perfectly synchronized. I thought I must have imagined it. We spent the next day installing diagnostic sensors to monitor the network feed. During a lunch break in the woman's office, I glanced at the small round mirror on the wall behind her. I caught a glimpse of my reflection. It was off by a fraction again, not quite matching my movements. The technician looked at me when I mentioned this. He frowned slightly but dismissed it as a tired mind, playing tricks after long hours. On the third day, I reviewed footage from the security cameras and noted the exact time segments where freezing occurred. They coincided with brief moments where reflections in the mirrors seemed out of sync. A reflection would linger after a person had moved, or occasionally move slightly ahead of the actual figure. I isolated a clip where the man in the hallway stopped, his reflection continuing to move forward a beat after he froze. I slowed the footage. It repeated. No explanation made sense. I shared the findings with the technician and my colleague. They suggested electronic interference or an optical illusion produced by lighting conditions. The lights in the building flickered, barely noticeable, but I recorded their pattern. It seemed random. The mirror discrepancies did not correlate perfectly with the lighting changes. There was no clear cause. On day 4, the anomalies increased. A woman I observed walking past a conference room looked into the mirror. Her reflection smiled as she kept a neutral expression. I repeated the observation with myself at the same spot. The reflection did not mirror my subtle frown after I raised my eyebrows. This time, it was impossible to doubt. While testing the hallways, the technician tripped the alarm on purpose. The sound was delayed by several seconds, coinciding exactly with a visible distortion in the reflections. The mirror surfaces seemed to ripple as if their reflective layer were liquid disturbed by a stone. I documented it frame by frame. No physical explanation accounted for the behavior. Late in the evening, I returned alone to the restroom where the largest mirror hung above the sink. The light above had been flickering steadily for 3 days. When I looked into that mirror, the reflection hesitated before my movement. A second later, it moved independently, pacing slowly beyond my gestures. I tested this calmly. I raised my right arm. My reflection stayed still for 2 beats, then raised its left arm. I blinked. The discrepancy was unmistakable. I asked myself whether to notify the woman or the man from security. Instead, I took photographic evidence, careful to capture the delayed and altered responses. When the woman returned the next morning, I showed her the images. She studied them closely, but suggested it was a trick of the environment. Perhaps the mirror had a double layer, an unusual glass construction producing a second reflection my eye mistook for lag. I doubted this, but did not press the point. I extended my observation to different mirrors in the building. In more than half, the reflection anomalies persisted. Sometimes the reflections appeared to move independently with slight delays. Other times, they mirrored actions I had not performed. A technician took spectral readings and found nothing unusual in the glass composition. By day 6, when the building's elevator doors opened, my reflection appeared inside the car, but I stood outside. It moved through the confined space, then stepped back, holding a pose I did not make. I waited until I was alone on the floor to check again. The mirror on the corridor wall showed the same delayed and altered copying. I encountered the man in the hallway and described what I had seen. He nodded, unfazed, and remarked that his own reflection sometimes seemed to ignore him. He did not express concern. This reassured me slightly, yet the anomaly had clearly grown more pronounced. In a security office, monitors fed live images from the cameras. When I appeared on screen, the feed froze for a moment. Behind the freeze, a shadowy figure moved on screen mimicking me, but with odd, jerky movements. The technician called it a glitch and adjusted settings. I saved the footage for analysis. The next test was to see if the anomaly responded to external stimuli. In one corridor, I placed a reflective panel parallel to the wall mirror, hoping to trap any delayed images between the two surfaces. For several minutes, the apparently independent reflections appeared trapped, repeating brief sequences endlessly until one slowly vanished, as if descending from sight. I did not feel compelled to act. The technician tried to replicate the phenomenon in other buildings with mirrors of similar construction and lighting, but reported normal reflections. This building alone exhibited the reflection delay and independent motion. I considered that the repeated flicker of the ceiling lights might influence perception somehow. I timed the light's flickering cycle. No consistent link emerged. The reflections continued showing independent actions at irregular intervals. On the final day of my investigation, I revisited the restroom mirror. Over the previous days, I had grown accustomed to the sight of my reflection hesitating, sometimes reacting differently. This time, the reflection paused entirely as I approached. Without warning, it moved to turn away from me. The mirror surface swept clean, reflecting only the room behind me, empty and silent. When the mirror returned to ordinary function a few seconds later, my reflection resumed synchrony. I left the building without further comment. The technician compiled reports, citing technical glitches as the likely explanation. But the last image of the mirror turning away remained fixed in my mind. The mirror observed, and it did not reflect.